Hello everyone. My name is Prakhar Kumar, and today I'm going to review the history section, the questions of history that were asked in the prelims exam today. Today is 10th October 2021, and most of you watching this video must have attended the prelims exam today for the UPSC. And I hope there are also students, the aspirants who are going to prepare for the exam for the coming attempts of 2020 or 21 or 22 or 23. So even for them, this video is going to be beneficial. We are going to review the questions of history in this video. Before formally starting with the review, let me tell you, there is something that I observed in this year's paper, especially in the section of history. I've been noticing the question trends of UPSC since last 3 to 4 years now. I mean, at least 3 to 4 years, because the question trends have changed recently. So let's say 5 years at max. And what I've noticed is year by year, UPSC is delving deeper into the topics of history. Year by year, it is making the preparation of history more difficult. Why I say this? There is a reason to this. If you see the question papers of prelims in the years of 2016, 17, let's say, you will find there is a direct relation of what is asked in the paper with your subject knowledge. Very few questions would be of such kind in which you will have to apply your knowledge with integrated studies that you have, the kind of preparation that you have done for UPSC. But then with subsequent years, what happened? I noticed that history has been taken to such a level in which a very deep study is required to crack all the questions. In fact, these days, the kind of questions that are asked in history are not only integrated with other subjects, for example, geography. They are also integrated within the subject matter of history. For instance, if you are studying Vijayanagar Empire, you must know what are the other sort of developments that are going in other parts of India at that time, not in Vijayanagar Empire, but at other places in India. Because a question may be asked to interrelate both the events, something that is going on in Vijayanagar Empire, or some development that is occurring in the Vijayanagar Empire with some other development occurring in some other place in India, within some other dynasty or within some other kind of rule or any merchant activity. Apart from this, there is one more trend that I noticed. Earlier, it was believed that medieval history section was very much ignored in the history syllabus because not much questions were asked from it. I mean, if you look at the papers of 2015, 14, 13, medieval history questions wouldn't be there, in fact, apart from the sections of art and culture. But having seen this complaint, UPSC has taken a note of this complaint, and it has started asking a lot more number of questions these years. So even the medieval section has become a lot more important for the aspirants who are trying to clear this exam. What I noticed this year is the interrelationships between history and geography. It's not only history and historical facts that we have to know in history. It's also the locational details that you must know. It's also the geographical features that are around the monuments and around a certain empire or a capital that you must be knowing. You must know the exact map locations of those places. For example, the famous capitals of different empires. For example, the famous monuments, where they lie, what rivers are around, what hills are around, and what kind of climate it has. All those sorts of information must be known by you. So you have to integrate your studies, not only in terms of interlinking history and geography, but in terms of interlinking history with polity, history with economy, history with cultural studies, history with international studies, all that you can think of, history with societal studies. Now, why I say this, I'll just let you know while I'm going to, when I'll explain the questions. Because there are questions in which history has been linked with current social developments, in which history has been linked with current international developments. There has been questions of such kinds. I mean, the current events has been directly implied in the history questions. That is why history is becoming more tougher to crack. Earlier, only historical facts were asked. Earlier, only the sections of history were asked, but now an integrated approach is being taken from the side of UPSC. Okay. Okay. On this note, let's start reviewing the question quickly. Okay, let's have a look at the first question. With reference to the history of ancient India, Bhavabhuti, Hastimalla, and Shemeshwara were famous Jain monks, playwrights, temple architects, philosophers. Now, let me tell you the first info that you must know about this question. If you are preparing for history, the first thing that you must know is the time period. By these names, Bhavabhuti, Hastimalla, and Kshemeshwar, you must know the time period which is being referred to it. That is the early medieval age. So one thing is sure, that this question is from early medieval age, because all these scholars who are mentioned here are from early medieval India. Now, are they Jain monks? For that, you will have to judge whether or not they are Jain monks, you will have to have faith in your studies about Jainism. Whatever you study for Jainism or Buddhism, you must have faith in it. Now, let me say it clearly to you. In case you are preparing Jainism and Buddhism, prepare these topics in an entirety. When I say in entirety, I mean you don't have to leave even a fact, even a sentence related to these two fields. Now, if you have studied that much amount of information on Jainism and Buddhism, you must be able to eliminate this option. Why? Because if you have studied almost everything on Jainism and Buddhism that is required for this exam, you must be able to eliminate these names from the section of Jainism, because you have a belief in yourself that these names did not appear anywhere when I was studying Jainism. You must have this belief in yourself. Okay, so Jain monks option is eliminated. They were not Jain monks. First. Second, comes to playwrights. You don't know whether they were playwrights or not. Let's say you don't know. Third, temple architects. Did you study about any temple architects in ancient India? I don't think so. Last, philosophers. Now, even this option can be eliminated. Why I say this? Because most of the philosophers that you must have studied about ancient India or early medieval India would belong to either Buddhist philosophy or Jaina philosophy or Brahminical philosophy, Vedanta philosophy, the 6 philosophical schools, whether it is Nyaya, Vaisheshika, or the Yoga or the other philosophical schools. So in all those philosophical schools, you must have noticed these names were not there. Now the option remains playwrights and temple architects. You have eliminated successfully the option of Jain monks and philosophers. What remains is playwrights and temple architects. Now, for this, judging out of these two, you must have a basic knowledge. When you will have a basic knowledge, let me tell you, the second point that you must notice, that you must be aware of here, is that this question is from culture. This section is from question is from the section of art and culture, and particularly the question is from the age of early medieval period. Now you must have studied a list of scholars that belong to this period, and some of them were Kalidas, some others were uh, Jayadev is one of them, right? And Jayadev was a writer. Kalidas was also a playwright. In the same way, you must have studied about Bhavabhuti. Bhavabhuti is a very famous name in North Indian literary tradition, because he I think he was a scholar of 8th century AD. 8th century AD, and Haste Malla belongs to 13th century. So they are playwriters. Haste Malla belongs to 13th century. I'm not sure about Kshemeshwara, but even if you know Bhavabhuti, or even if you know about Haste Malla, or even if you know about Kshemeshwara, even one of them, you can arrive to the answer. You don't need to know about each of them. Okay, so it is true that the questions asked are tough, but there is a way to arrive at the answers, because you don't have to completely know the answers in every sense. You don't have to know about all the three personalities that are mentioned there. You only Bhavabhuti's information would be sufficient for you to answer the question. So let me mention some things about Bhavabhuti. Okay, let me first release this. In the subsequent questions, you'll come to know why history part has become more tough these years, in all these years, and why UPSC is hell bent on asking such questions. I don't understand, because some questions are really not to the level of GS students. They are to the level of optional history students. Okay. Okay, there is this play called Uttar Ramcharit. Okay, this play is very famous. The writer of this play is Bhavabhuti. Apart from this, there is this another play. It is called Mahavir Charit. Okay. Now let's come to Haste Malla. Haste Malla wrote, it's a southern name. I'm very much confused over this because it's a tougher part for me. I'm not from South India actually. It's a Pattavali. The name is Pattavali Prabandh. Pattavali Prabandh Sangrah. Okay, it's a very famous play by Haste Malla. Now, again, I'm repeating, you don't have to know the information related to all the three personalities. Information about only Bhavabhuti or only Haste Malla would be sufficient for you to answer this. If you people knew about Kshemeshwara, even then you could answer this question. Okay. If you have studied about the literary traditions in the early medieval India very judiciously, this question will be a child's play for you people. But even if you did not, you could arrive to the answer in steps. Okay, let's proceed. The second question says, there are two statements. You'll have to find out the correct option among these. The Montagu-Chelmsford reforms of 1919 recommended granting of voting rights to all the women. Now, let me tell you, this statement straight away is a wrong statement. Even if you don't know the answer, even if you don't know that this statement is correct or not, you can think logically over it. How? First, voting rights for women was not granted very easily all over the world. It was granted in stages. It was granted in successive stages after a long period of struggle by women. It started from France, and then it spread all over Europe, and then it came to Asian countries where women started demanding voting rights. In India, voting rights were given equally to every citizen. I mean, universal adult franchise was granted to every citizen only in 1947. This fact must be known by you all. Okay. So this statement is incorrect. The reforms of 1919, it is also called the Government of India Act of 1919, did not recommend granting voting rights to women. In fact, all the women above the age of 21. It was not the case. Now, you have to think other way also. Even if these voting rights would have been granted, it would have been granted to propertied men and women only, because universal adult franchise was not the historical reality of that time. Let's come to second statement. The Government of India Act of 1935 gave women reserved seats to legislature. Now, this statement is correct because this is true. If you have read the Government of India Act 1935 very judiciously, you must know that this statement is correct. It's a factual question. It's a factual statement. You must know this, that they were given reserved seats. Not only women, there were other sections also who were provided reserved seats from this act. There were Dalits who were provided reserved seats. So this statement is true in itself because you must have studied it. It's a basic part of your UPSC preparation. Okay. So the answer to this is B. 2 only is the correct answer. Let's come to the next question. With reference to 8th August 1942. Okay, let me tell you. This question is a bit tricky, but it is not tricky to the level that it can deceive your intelligence. With reference to 8th August 1942 in Indian history, which one of the following is the correct statement? Or which one of the following statements is correct? The Quit India resolution was adopted by All India Congress Committee. The Viceroy's Executive Council was expanded to include more Indians. The Congress ministries resigned in 7 provinces. Now, you must be knowing the Congress had made their government in 1937 in the provincial elections. Next, Cripps proposed an Indian Union with full dominion status once the Second World War was over. So they were called Cripps proposals, or the Cripps mission that had come to India. Sorry, they were a part of Cripps mission. But the question is, were this mission related to this particular date? The answer is no. This particular date is mentioned with the reference of Quit India movement. If you read Bipin Chandra's book, if you read Shekhar Bandyopadhyay's book, or even if you read the Spectrum History consolidated book that there is in the market, you will find this date there. The importance of this date is that Gandhi ji gave the slogan of do or die from the famous Goalia tank in Bombay. Goalia tank Bombay speech of Gandhi is very famous, wherein he appealed the people to go for the slogan of do or die. He said that all I care is now the Swaraj. All I care for now is the attainment of Swaraj. How you achieve Swaraj is none of my concern. So it is very controversial that this question also is often discussed in the historical optional paper, that within the last years of his movement, Gandhiji, in fact, went apart, he diverged from the path of non-violence, and here he is appealing directly to the people with the slogan of do or die. Okay, because he clearly told that whether you achieve this Swaraj with violence or non-violence is not my concern. All I'm saying is this is the time to resurrect. This is the time to rebel, and how you rebel is none of my concern. So indirectly, he's appealing the people to come and take the lead for the revolutionary movement that was going on. That was just starting with the name of Quit India movement. Okay, and this resolution of Quit India movement was passed in the meeting that was held in the Gwalior tank by the All India Congress Committee. So this A is the correct answer. Okay, let's take the next one. Who among the following is associated with Songs from Prison, a translation of ancient Indian religious lyrics in English? A very interesting question. This may be confusing because people might think the answer is Sarojini Naidu. Why? Because she has also written several books written named on this. I mean, the names of the books written by Sarojini Naidu are with the same names. I mean, almost the same names. But the answer is not Sarojini Naidu. The answer is Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Again, the question is directly asked from Gandhi. I mean, repeating again here. I've already informed most of my students earlier that Gandhi is a section which you cannot just leave in modern Indian history. Gandhi has to be read in details with each and every facet of Gandhi that you may find in the freedom struggle, whether it be his social aspects, his cultural aspects, his political aspects. All kinds of Gandhi has to be read. There is a political Gandhi, there is a social reformer Gandhi, there is a Gandhi who is an environmentalist. So all the forms of Gandhi has to be read in totality for the UPSC preparation. Okay. Now this question was from civil disobedience movement. Civil disobedience movement, which was from 1930 to 1934. During this movement, Gandhiji was taken to Yarwada jail in Pune, wherein Pune Pact also happened between Gandhi and Ambedkar, the famous Pune Pact of 1932. And from the Yarwada jail, he wrote these songs, he wrote these poems, which are called Songs from Prison. Next question. Okay. Here UPSC has come to medieval section. Now we will count one by one how many questions are being asked from medieval history of India. Okay, because recently the weightage of medieval history of India has increased in the UPSC prelims exam especially. So with reference to medieval India, which of the following is the correct sequence of ascending order? You have to focus here. Ascending order in terms of size. Pargana Sarkar Suba, Sarkar Pargana Suba, Suba Sarkar Pargana, Pargana Suba Sarkar. First info that you must be given here that these terms are not from Delhi Sultanate period. These terms are from Mughal India, Mughal period. Okay. In the Delhi Sultanate age, these divisions had not developed to their full-fledged administrative units. Okay. In the Delhi Sultanate age, these units were still in the phases of development. But by the coming of Mughal age, they were fully established in the administrative system of Mughals. Now, let us look at the answer. The answer is, of course, A. You see, Suba was a province. Now, as you know, the largest unit of local administration is the province. Within the provinces may be divided into several units. Those units may be collection of villages, may be collection of mansabs or jagirs. And all those collection of villages or collection of mansabs or jagirs may further be divided into several other units. So the smallest unit was the Pargana, and then came Sarkar, and the largest was Suba. Even if you read NCERT, it is given there. This division is clearly given in the NCERT. I'm not sure whether it is in 7th class NCERT or 12th class NCERT, but it is clearly mentioned there. Okay. If you are even basically aware about the facts of medieval history, this was not a very tough question. Let me tell you, this was an easy question. Even if you have prepared on most basic uh, purposes for the medieval history, you must be aware of this fact. Let's see the next question. Who among the following was associated as secretary with Hindu female school, which later came to be known as Bethune Female School? Okay, again, this question is very confusing. People may get confused between Annie Besant and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. The answer is, of course, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Okay, this female school, in fact, was the first female school established in India, and that was run by Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Okay, this was a factual question. If you have read the section of reform movements and religious movements that will the social reform movements that were going on in the modern India after 1857 or before, even before 1857, you must be aware of this fact. This was a factual question and you have to directly answer it. You have to know this fact for sure, because Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar and there's this Raja Ram Mohan Roy, these famous personalities have to be studied in detail. Okay, Dayanand Saraswati, then Vivekananda, Ramakrishna Paramhans, all these famous personalities. Even Devendranath Tagore, there are others also. So that section is very important. One question is asked on yearly basis in UPSC from that section. In the context of colonial India, Shah Nawaz Khan, Prem Kumar Sehgal, and Gurbakh Singh Dhillon are remembered as. This was an easy question. This was a very easy question. Some questions that are asked in UPSC are directly from the general historical concerns, directly from the general historical topics that has to be studied mandatorily. So this question, in fact, is a very easy question. It was directly asked from the INA movement, Indian National Army, that was established by Subhash Bose, Subhash Chandra Bose. Okay, the answer is officers of Indian National Army. Okay, you must know Subhash Chandra Bose was not the first one to establish the Indian National Army. It was, I think, a person called Mohan Singh or some Mohan. I'm getting confused here, but Mohan was the name of person who, at the first instance, established the INA, but his INA could not be a success, and he, in fact, it was himself who suggested to the Japanese that you should hand over the working of INA to the Subhash Chandra Bose, and then Subhash Chandra Bose was made the supreme leader. And then what happened? It is the period of Second World War wherein Subhash Chandra Bose is establishing INA with the Japanese help in order to invade India with the Japanese help and defeat the British. Okay, and what happened is the movement, in fact, failed. Some of them were captured, some of them were killed, some of them ran away, and the people who were captured, they were tried. They were tried in India at the Red Fort. And this happened in 1946. This happened in the time when the national movement was at its peak. And their hearings were taken by some of the very famous lawyers of India, Jawaharlal Nehru being one of them. And these people, Shahnawaz Khan, Prem Kumar Sehgal, and Gurbakh Singh Dhillon, they were made champions of those times. They walked out of the Red Fort like heroes, having won the cases. So this was a very famous struggle. And even if you are feebly aware about the historical facts about INA, you must answer this. It was not a tough question to answer. Okay, let's have a look at next question. Okay, this question is again from medieval India. And this question is from 18th century. In 18th century, what happened? There was decline of Mughals. And due to decline of Mughals, there were many independent and semi-independent states that were emerging in different parts of India. Okay, you have to identify which state emerged in what ways. The Nizamat of Arcot emerged out of Hyderabad state. Now, this statement is correct. The Mysore kingdom emerged out of Vijayanagar Empire. This statement is also correct. There was this Wodeyar dynasty in the Mysore kingdom. Tipu Sultan and Hyder Ali were the kings of Wodeyar dynasty only, right? So when Vijayanagar Empire disintegrated and when Mysore kingdom was emerging, Wodeyar dynasty was placed in its charge. Okay, this statement is also correct. So if you read Satish Chandra also, these information will be given there. And Rohilkhand kingdom was formed out of the territories occupied by Ahmad Shah Durrani. Now this is a wrong statement. Rohilkhand was not a kingdom of occupied territories. In fact, it was established by a person called Muhammad Khan, I think. It was called Ali Muhammad Khan. And he established this kingdom of Rohilkhand. And majorly this movement by Ali Muhammad Khan was taken after the downfall of Aurangzeb. So this statement is wrong. These are factual questions. There is no scope of much discussion here. These are factual questions which must be known to a history student. Okay. So the answer is, of course, A. 1 and 2 are the correct options. Okay. Which one of the following statements is correct? Ajanta caves lie in the gorge of Wagora River. Sanchi Stupa lies in the gorge of Chambal River. Pandulena cave shrines lie in the gorge of Narmada River. And Amravati Stupa lies in the gorge of Godavari River. Very tricky question. A very well-framed question. And that is why I'm saying history is becoming integrated with other subjects in coming years. I mean, in recent years, UPSC has started this trend of integrating history with other subjects. Now, in this case, it is being integrated with geography. I'm not saying history optional any history optional student would be aware of this fact. But for a student who is studying history for a GS purpose, for the GS purpose, he might get confused in this question because it's very tough to integrate for a GS student here. The correct answer to this is Ajanta caves, which lie in the gorge of Wagora River. Now, this Wagora River is a tributary of Tapi. Now, you all know where Tapi is located. Tapi is below Narmada, and Tapi flows in a gorge, like Narmada. Narmada and Tapi are two rivers which flow from east to west, right? They emerge somewhere in the central highlands of India, and they flow into the Arabian Sea. They drain into the Arabian Sea. Now, Wagora River is one of the tributaries of Tapi, and beside the gorges of Wagora River, Ajanta caves have been carved out. These caves date from, I think, 200 BC to 400 AD. Somewhere around this period, these caves were developed. So if you have studied the art and culture portion, you must be knowing about Ajanta caves in a lot of detail. But even if you complete the syllabus of art and culture, you might get confused here, whether or not it is on the banks of or the gorges of Wagora River. Let me tell you, when I prepared for my exam, I'm very proud to say this, that I made sure that I marked the rivers of Ajanta and Ellora, the rivers along which these two sites are located. So I have written the name of Wagora River in my own notes. So you have to study like this. You have to focus on each and every detail that can be asked. Okay. Next. Okay, this is not a question from history. Let's leave this. Okay. The demand that Bangla has to be one of the national languages was raised in the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan. Now, I'm not saying this is, not directly related to history. Of course, it is related to history. It is more of a general aware question, general awareness related question. The answer to this has been marked by me. It's C. Both the statements are correct. I have not got into the details of this question right now, till now, because the details has to be searched and well theorized. But since, I mean, in a hustle bustle of recording this video, I have not been able to catch up with the details of this question. Let's leave this question for now. Let's come back to 11th. Yes, this is a very interesting question with reference to Chaunsat Yogini Temple. Situated in Morena, consider the following statements. Now, as a student of art and culture, as a student of history, you must have studied the development of temple architecture in India. In the development of temple architecture, you must have studied different schools of temple architecture, different uh, types of temple architectures which are existing in India. But apart from those types, you have to specifically study some different sites. Within those types, within those schools, you have to specifically study different sites. And this one is one of those sites, which is very famous sites. Let me tell you this, the design of this Chaunsat Yogini temple is like this. It is a rounded temple. There is some the mandapa is somewhere here at the center, and there is a courtyard which surrounds it. It is a circular temple. Okay. Now let us look at the options, the statements. It is a circular temple built during the reign of Kachapagata dynasty. This is a correct statement. This is a direct factual knowledge that you have to know. There is no discussion related to this. Okay. It is the only circular temple built in India. Now you have to focus on this word only here. Is it true? I don't think so. It can't be the only circular temple. There are many circular temples in India. I mean, in the evolution of temple architecture, there must have been many circular temples built at the first instance. And then a certain design must have been standardized in the later ages. Okay. At the first instance, it must be a circular temple or a rectangular temple or a square temple. But it must have taken time to standardize the size and shapes of the temple or the regional architectures of the temple. So it is not the only temple. This statement must be wrong. You have to think like this. It was meant to promote Vaishnava cult in region. Now, again, you have to focus here. Vaishnava cult. I don't think so. The name of the temple is Chaunsat Yogini Temple. It is a Yogini temple. The cult that is related to this temple must be feminine. The name itself says that the cult has to be feminine. It cannot be Vaishnava cult. Okay. So again, this option is eliminated. Its design has given rise to a popular belief that it was the inspiration behind the Indian Parliament building. Now, this is a correct statement. This is a correct statement because Indian Parliament is also round and designed like this. There are 64 pillars in this temple, and you'll find pillars of the same kind in the Parliament building of India in Delhi also. So option 1 and 4 are correct, 2 and 3 are wrong. The correct option is option C. Now, this is a kind of question where you have to know exact details of some famous temples. The Chaunsat Yogini temple was asked this time. There may be another, there may be Meenakshi temple that may be asked for the next time. There may be the famous Sun temple that might be asked for the next time. So you have to keep yourself prepared for those questions. Let's come to other question. It's a very easy question. Everyone must answer this. Everyone should have answered this who thinks that they are preparing judiciously for this exam, because this was a direct question from Harappan civilization and it was a very easy question. Whenever you study Harappan civilization, you make a list of cities and what they are famous for. And whenever the name of Dholavira comes in your mind, you know that it was famous for the water reservoirs and the water management system. Okay, so the answer to this is Dholavira, straight away. No Kalibangan is the wrong answer. No Rakhigadi, no Roper. Dholavira is the correct answer. No discussions are required over this. These discussions are directly from the material of basic history syllabus of your UPSC. Okay. 13th question. In the first quarter of 17th century in India, this was a tough question. In the first quarter of 17th century, when you say 17th century, you refer to the period from first quarter of 17th century is start of 1600s, that is 1600s, sorry, and it spans from 1600 to 1625. This is the first quarter. First 25 periods of 25 years of 17th century. In the first quarter of 17th century, in which of the following were the factory or factories of the East India Company located? Okay, for this, you must know the chronology of the coming of British to India. Let me mention you the chronology here. And let me tell you, whenever you study the arrival of European companies to India in the modern history syllabus of GS, you have to list down the chronological layers of the companies and people arriving. Apart from that, you have to also list down the chronological layers of the places which are being captured by them, which are being held by them as factories or centers of trade or places of revenue collections. So all those have to be listed down chronologically. As a serious student of UPSC, this is the least requirement you should do. Okay. Now let me make you aware of the chronology here, the importance of chronology here. Okay. The first to come was Sir William Hawkins in 1609. He wanted to establish a factory, but he was denied the permission. In 1609, he was denied the permission. However, what he did, he started trading from Masulipattnam, and later on, company went on building a factory at Masulipattnam in 1611. So in 1611, the first factory comes up, which is at Masulipattnam. The next is 1613. This year is very important. In 1613, there was a farman that was given by the Mughal emperor. The Mughal emperor was Jahangir. The farman was given by the Mughal emperor to the Indian rulers, and in that farman it was written that the company will be allowed to do a duty-free trade in all the territories of India, which were controlled by Mughals. So in 1613, after that farman, what they did, they established a factory at Surat. So you see, in the period from 1600 to 1625, we have covered two places, which are Masulipattnam and Surat. And both these places are not in option. Let us move forward now. Let us see what happens in coming years. You see, the importance of chronology is highlighted in this question. UPSC, the best thing about UPSC is that it frames all kinds of questions, and each question of every kind is the highest one of its kind. That is the beauty of UPSC. Okay. In 1615, after the farman was given in 1613, in 1615, British established three factories at three places. The names are Agra. The second is Ahmedabad. Don't mind my writing. And the third one is Broch. And we see only Broch is given here. Even Agra and Ahmedabad are not mentioned. In 1615, this was done after Sir Thomas Roe had taken the permission to establish these factories. So Sir Thomas Roe is the name related to this. Now we see only the name of Broch is given here. After 1615, from 1615 to 1625, there was no development of factories. So these were all the factories that were established in the first quarter of 17th century, and only Broch is the correct answer. If you knew this basic information, you will be answering correctly. If you did not know it, you will not be able to answer this, because this was a tough question. For this, you have to revise your content again and again. Very, how do I say this? It's judicious is not a right word. You have to pay attention of a kind in which you have to be hard at yourself. You have to be hard at yourself to an extent wherein you make sure that each and every place has to be remembered. And until it gets remembered in a chronological order, you don't leave that topic. You have to be harsh on yourself while remembering these things. And they are important. They might not seem important. They might seem impossible. How can we remember such chronological layers? But they are important. Let me tell you, they are possible. It is possible to remember them, because you can actually trace the movements of British. You can locate them on maps. You can keep a map aside of every period that you are studying in history, and you can locate each and every area of those of importance of those periods. So it is not impossible. Yes, it is tough, but it is doable. And as a student of UPSC, it is your duty to search for these answers. Okay, next. This was a very easy question. Question number 14. It might seem very tough, but let me tell you, this is a very easy and direct question. From the decline of Guptas until the rise of Harshvardhana, in the early 7th century, which of the following kingdoms were holding power in northern India? Now, there are 6 questions. So students, most of the students would have got frightened here. How can we judge from 6 options? But you see, most of those options here are useless. Why I say this? Let me tell you. First, you see from the decline of Guptas. So if Guptas are declining, Guptas have to be in the political scene in northern India. That is sure. That is for sure. Sorry. Yeah. So Guptas have to be present in the political scene. So you cannot eliminate this option, the Guptas of Magadha. They have to be there. So the first option is correct. Now look at the question again. From the decline of the Guptas until the rise of Harshvardhana. Now, even if you have a basic knowledge of history of ancient India, you must know that Harshvardhana was a ruler of Pushyabhuti dynasty. So the Pushyabhutis of Thanesar, they also have to be in the political scene mandatorily. Okay, it is very mandatory for the Pushyabhutis also to be in the political scene in the northern India after the decline of Guptas. So the option first and option third have to be there. Now let us come to the answers. First, second, and fifth, it is eliminated because third is not here. 2, 3, and 4. This is eliminated because first is not here. Last one is also eliminated. Which one is left? The answer is second. So the answer to this question is given in the question itself. Right? You don't even have to go for the reading of other 4 options. The answer is available in the question, the statement of the question itself. Harshvardhana was from the Pushyabhuti dynasty. And since Guptas are declining, they have to be in political scene. 1 and 3 are mandatory. And 4th and 6th are aligned with them. The fourth one is the Mukharis, and sixth is Matrikas. Now, as far as I know, the Yadavas of Devagiri developed later on. They are much later developments. Okay. Next question. So this is how you have to think. Some questions may be very easy, although they may seem very tough because they are framed in such ways. Now, this question is also from medieval India. You see, this is, I think, third or fourth question from medieval India that we are encountering. I think third. This is the third question. This is from Vijayanagar Empire. According to Portuguese writer Nunes, the women in Vijayanagar Empire were expert in which of the following areas? Wrestling, astrology, accounting. Soothsaying is prediction. Prediction, it's a kind of tantric practice wherein people predict about your future. Okay. Now, if you have studied about Vijayanagar Empire, there are some things that you must know. There are a list of travelers, I think 6 to 7 travelers, which came to Vijayanagar Empire, and they have left a detailed account of the empire, about the cities of the Vijayanagar Empire, about the building of the capital city, about the temples, about the markets, the society, the women. They have left a detailed account of it. Okay. Now let me list you some of the travelers. I've enlisted all the travelers here, and I'm writing them one by one. First one is Fernão Nunes, about whom the question is asked. He came at the time of Achyut Rai. He was the ruler in whose reign Nunes came to Vijayanagar, Achyut Rai. Okay. Second is Abdul Razak. He was a Persian. He came from Persia. Third was Niccolo di Conti. He was from Italy. Fourth is Nikitin. His first name is very complex. I'm not writing it here. He is from Russia. Of course, he's a Russian, so his name has to be complex one. Next, Marco Polo. Marco Polo is a very famous traveler. He is from Venice. Sixth is, you see, Ibn Battuta. Even Ibn Battuta had visited Vijayanagar Empire. He is from Morocco, everyone knows. Read about the book written by Ibn Battuta. It's called Rehla. It contains the details of Indian society and culture, right? It's travel account. It's called Rehla. Next is Duarte Barbosa. Duarte Barbosa. He's from Portugal. And eighth is Dominigo Paris. He is also from Portugal. Now, Nunes is also a Portuguese. Barbosa is also Portuguese, and Pace is also Portuguese. So you have to remember this. 3 travelers are from Portugal only. Okay. One is an Italian, Niccolo di Conti, and Abdul Razak is from Persia. Let me read this, clear this. Now, answer to this. Before coming to answer to this, before coming to the answer, let me tell you, all these travelers, first, there are some things very common to these all travelers. Most of the information about the Vijayanagar Empire has been rebuilt or reconstructed on the information that is collected from the accounts of these travelers. That is why these travel accounts are very important. Whichever book you read about Vijayanagar, whenever you read details about Vijayanagar cities, you will find reference of these travelers only. All of them talked about the magnificence of the cities of the Vijayanagar, magnificence of the court life of the Vijayanagar. All of them talked about it. Okay, and as far as Nunes is concerned, he wrote a long, detailed account on the women of Vijayanagar Empire, and he mentioned that women were involved in various kind of activities, and all four of these were parts of it. Apart from all these, there were other activities also in which they were involved. Okay, wrestling, astrology, accounting, soothsaying. This says that even women were an active participant in the political and cultural life of Vijayanagar Empire, not only men. So Nunes is the right answer, and sorry, Nunes is the person who described all these four forms in which women were involved, four activities in which women were involved, and the answer to this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. D. D is the right answer. Now this was a bit trickier because there is a load of information that you have to remember for in order to reach the correct answer. But still I'm saying these are doable questions because all the set of information that are required to reach the answer are fixed, and if you revise them again and again, you can easily reach to the answers. Okay, there is not much to remember. Next, this is okay, give me a second. Yeah, about this question, this has been a habit of UPSC to ask some question in history, in history out of the blue, from nowhere. It seems as if it's just picking a hand in the sea, and whatever comes out is put on there as a question. This has been the trend of UPSC since last 2 to 3 years. I mean, last time they asked about a book written during Bengal partition of 1905, and no one had heard about that book. I mean, when it was searched, the major sources which are read for the UPSC history syllabus did not include that the name of that book. In the same way, in one of the years, there was this word from ancient India which was asked in the UPSC exam, prelims exam, and when we searched about that info in the books, most of the sources of ancient India did not furnish us the results. There was this book written by Romila Thapar, Early India, and in one of the pages, in very small, passing line, that word was mentioned. It was not even a major word to be remembered. It was just mentioned as a passing reference. So UPSC can sometimes go to such extensive details. So this is one of those questions, I think. It has just been asked out of the blue, and you have to be prepared for such kind of questions. There's this place at Madanpalle. Even I did not know about, even I did not have a clue about this question. Let me tell you very honestly. I have been reading history from last, I think 6 to 7 years regularly, but I did not have a clue about this question. A place is Madanpalle. This is in Andhra Pradesh, and you have to choose an option out of these about the place. The correct answer to this is the option 3. Rabindranath Tagore here went on a trip to South India, and it was the year of 1990, the same year when Jallianwala Bagh happened, right? And in this trip, he stayed at this place called Madanpalle. He stayed at one of the places which was established by the Theosophical Society of Annie Besant. So Theosophical movement was already going on in South India, led by Annie Besant at that time. And in some of the headquarters of Theosophical Society, Rabindranath Tagore stayed for some days, and he stayed in one of the cottages there. That cottage is today called Tagore Cottage. It is named after him since he had stayed there, and in that cottage only he did two major things. First, he translated the Bengali version to English, and secondly, the tune of Janaganamana was also composed there only. So that place is famous for these two historical events. Again, an out of the blue question, not in the sources, and yes, you have to be you have to get ready, be ready to get surprised in UPSC exams. Nothing much can be done about these questions if you don't know these. Let's proceed to the next. Okay, this is a question which you can arrive to the right answer even if you are deficient in knowledge. This is a classic example of all those questions in which elimination criteria works. Okay, for instance, let's take me. If I was a juvenile, I would think upon it. But since I know the information about all these three places, I can correctly come to the answer. So give me a second. Yes. Now let's take these places: Burzahom, Chandraketugarh, and Ganeshwar. These three are very famous names from the ancient history of India. All these three are very famous places. Now, someone who is very sincerely preparing for history will know exact details about these places. But someone who is just a starter, someone for whom this UPSC is like a first attempt in which he is not well prepared, he or she can also arrive at the right answer in this. Now, the most basic place, the most famous place in this list, according to me, is Burzahom. All of us know that Burzahom is a famous Neolithic site in Kashmir. It is a Neolithic site. Secondly, look at what it is matched with: rock-cut shrines. Do you think there were rock-cut shrines in the Neolithic times? There was no rock-cut architecture. Rock-cut architecture started in the modern times. In fact, the first rock-cut architecture is visible in the modern times. It became famous in the post-modern and the Gupta period. But in the Neolithic period, there was no shrines. There were no shrines. In fact, there was no sign of cultic significance. There was no. I mean, there was cultic significance, of course, but as an institution moving towards religion, moving towards religious activities, this trend had not developed in Neolithic period. It is a later development. In fact, it is a much later development. So if you think historically, this is wrong. But this way of thinking can come up for an optional student. If you're studying GS, you can strictly eliminate this option. You can clearly eliminate this option because you must know that Burzahom is a Neolithic site. That is the prime reason to eliminate this option, and that is enough, in fact. Next, let's say Ganeshwar. Now, Ganeshwar is a pre-Harappan culture. And we know in pre-Harappan culture and in some periods of Harappan culture also, in fact, extending to other periods also, there was this phase which is called Chalcolithic phase. So Ganeshwar is a famous Chalcolithic site. And since it is a Chalcolithic site, of course, copper artifacts have to be there. And next is Chandraketugarh. Chandraketugarh has been famous for terracotta art. Chandraketugarh has been famous for coinage, has been famous for the study of coins, because the first punch-marked coins were found from Chandraketugarh only. The layer of NBPW pottery, northern black painted ware, the age of Buddha. That is why Chandraketugarh has been famously recognized as the place from where NBPW has been excavated. So these places are famous for these many reasons. And if you know these exactly, you can answer these. If you don't know, you can eliminate the options. For instance, first will be eliminated. First is not correct. So option A is eliminated. Option B is eliminated. All you are left with option C and D. Now you have to be a bit knowledgeable in judging the options, whether it is 3 only or both 2 and 3. So if you know even basically about Ganeshwar and Chandraketu, you will arrive at the option that the correct option is 2 and 3. Okay, let's come to next question. Next question is my favorite for this paper, in fact. First, because it is from medieval. The medieval questions have got more weightage now, as it is visible in the question paper. Second, this question is very well framed. I love the way UPSC has been framing questions these days. It initiates your thinking process. Okay, that is why even if you have all the knowledge of these topics, you might get it incorrect, because you will not be able to interrelate in which UPSC is demanding you from in which UPSC is demanding these days. Let us look at the first statement. It was during the reign of Iltutmish that Genghis Khan reached the Indus in pursuit of a fugitive Khwarezm prince. Yes, this is a correct information. The Khwarezmian prince had escaped the Khwarezmi Empire, and he came to the court of Iltutmish in search of refuge. And Iltutmish had accepted him. And in hunt of that fugitive prince, Genghis Khan marched and reached the Indus River. This is a direct question that is asked from the reign of Iltutmish. If you have studied Delhi Sultanate, this fact must not be missed. This is given in all the sources, all the standard sources. This fact will be given. So first option is very plain. First option is very factual, taken directly from the books, taken directly from the sources. Let us take the other sources. In fact, first let us come to the third statement. It was during the reign of Dev Rai II of Vijayanagar Empire that Vasco da Gama reached the coast of Kerala. This is the tricky part in this question. This statement is very well framed. Okay, now let me mention you first the name of the dynasties and kings of the Vijayanagar Empire. First, there was Sangama dynasty. It was followed by Suluva dynasty. Yes. Then came the Tuluva dynasty. And this was followed by Aravidu dynasty. So first, there were 4 dynasties. And each dynasty had its own rulers, own set of rulers. So this statement is a tough statement. It's a very tough judgment to make, that in which period Vasco da Gama came to India, during whose reign, during which king's reign, and that king belongs to which dynasty. Even if you know the dynastical time period, you may come to the answer, but I think it is a statement of a kind in which you have to know the exact time period of the king also. Okay, now let me tell you, this statement is wrong. Why I tell you this? Okay, now, see, Vasco da Gama is coming India in 1498. The discovery of India, the famous discovery of India that was made in 1498. Although it was not discovery of India, it was a discovery of sea route to India. Now, this was the time period in which the ruler of Vijayanagar Empire was Narasimha Rai II. Narasimha Rai II, and he was from Suluva dynasty. Okay. Now the king who is mentioned here, Dev Rai II. Dev Rai II is a king of Sangama dynasty. So UPSC can get into such fine details of historical facts. Now here you have to apply your senses. I told you in the start of the class that you have to do interlinking studies, interlinking history with geography, interlinking history with other disciplines. In the same way, you have to interlink the subject matters of internal topics of history also. You have to link Vijayanagar with the European traders. You have to link European traders with the Mughals. You have to link the declining Mughals with the other emerging regional powers. You will have to, you should have the ability to interlink the British age in 18th century with the rest of the principalities of India, the developments that are going in other places. Not you don't have to focus only on the British. So for each period, all that is going on in the landmass of India must be at your fingerprints. That is the requirement of UPSC. You don't have to study principality wise, or you don't have to study dynasty wise. You have to study period wise. And that is why there is importance of periodization in history. This question paper is a gist. I mean, I should say that this question paper is a classical example of the way in which we can approach the history syllabus of UPSC. It's a basic learning gist of the ways in which we can study history. Look at the second statement. It was during the reign of Muhammad bin Tughlaq that Timur occupied Multan and crossed the Indus. Do you think this statement is right? Okay, let me tell you the correct answer. Correct answer is A. Only the first option is correct. Even the second option is not correct. So here also there is a interlinking that is required. This is a very well framed question, I'm telling you. This is in fact the best question of this UPSC set of 2021. This is the best question that I encountered in today's paper. It was not during the reign of Muhammad bin Tughlaq. It was in fact during the reign of the last Tughlaq ruler. His name was Nasruddin Muhammad Shah Tughlaq. And Nasruddin Muhammad Shah Tughlaq came to the throne after Firuz Shah Tughlaq, I guess. The first one was Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. Second was Muhammad bin Tughlaq. The third was Firuz Shah Tughlaq. And the last was Nasruddin Muhammad Shah Tughlaq, in whose reign Timur had occupied Multan and attacked India in 1398. This was the Timur's attack. And after this, after the sacking of Delhi, after the Timur's invasion, there was a process of disintegration of Delhi Sultanate. Okay. So now Timur's invasion is a major event in history. So you must know who was the ruler of Delhi Sultanate against whom he invaded. This is a basic information. Now, I know the third statement is very tough, but the second statement is very basic. You must know that. The first statement is directly available in book. The second statement is upon your intelligence. And the third statement is upon your repeated revisions. It depends only upon how much you have revised the syllabus. Because until you revise repetitively, you cannot come to a conclusion for the third statement. So history requires repeated revisions. Apart from repeated revisions, you will have to keep adding to your notes, keep enriching your notes. So it's a very hard work that is required to reach at this level, because pre is not the only exam that you have to clear. You have to clear the mains also. You have to get into the interviews and clear that also. This is the primary exam. This is the primary requirement of that exam. First, integrate the studies and study to this level of depth, especially in history. Okay, let's look at the next question. Okay, for the last two questions, you will be surprised how history, even history, can be related to current affairs. Okay, I'm not saying these are directly from current affairs, but these are in a way related to the current affairs. You must have studied the current news. It came recently within the. It is the news within the last year that the famous churches of Goa. I mean, some new additions have been made to the UNESCO's World Heritage Sites. And whenever a new edition is made, it is a duty of a UPSC aspirant to go through all the sites at once. And you must be knowing that the famous churches of Goa, established by the Portuguese at that time, are a part of World Heritage Sites. Okay? Now, look at here. Look at the statements. Saint Francis Xavier was one of the founding members of the G-Site order. Saint Francis Xavier died in Goa, and a church is dedicated to him there. The feast of Saint Francis Xavier is celebrated in Goa each year. And you'll be surprised how this question is related to that fact of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And let me tell you, this statement, the second statement, this statement is very tricky. It is a wrong statement. You have been tricked in this statement. In case you consider it a correct statement, this is not correct. Saint Francis Xavier did not die in Goa, and his body is not buried there. Okay. Also, his this church is not a place wherein his body is buried, and this even this church is a part. The church which is there, the name of the church is Bom Jesus Basilica, but that is not a place where his body is buried. His body was buried somewhere else, in somewhere at some place in China, and some relics of that that region, some relics of that grave was transferred to this place or to this church in Goa. So this is a tricky statement. This is a wrong statement. Apart from this, both the statements, the first one and the third one, are correct, because Saint Francis Xavier was a Portuguese who came to India, and he was a missionary leader. He was a missionary leader, and he is called the Lord of Goa. He is venerated as a lord. He's very famous there. Okay, so the correct answer to this is C. 1 and 3. So the first and third are the correct statements. The second one is wrong. And see, if you know about the World Heritage Sites and their importance, if you have read certain descriptions about the World Heritage Sites, for example, Rani Ki Vav, which ruler was the one who built the Rani Ki Vav, in which state it is located, what is the importance of that site? If you read such descriptions about World Heritage Sites, you can answer these questions. Correct? Let's take the next question. This is again directly related to the current affairs. You must have studied about a recent judgment of Supreme Court, in which the Supreme Court said that even the daughters are equal participant in the holders of property after the death of the father, or as a descendant of father. Apart from the sons, even the daughters are also an equal participant. Now, this was a recent Supreme Court judgment that was given. In the light of this judgment, you must explore the descendant laws, the laws of property that were existing not only in modern India, but in ancient and medieval India. These are the two schools of laws that existed. The first one is schools of Mitakshara, and the second one is school of Dayabhava. Even if you would have read the basic current affairs material of any coaching center, any standard coaching center, or any site from where you can download the basics current affairs material, this information would be given there about the ancient civil schools of the property claims. Okay, these two schools have certain norms. Let me give you some hints. Since Hindu succession laws have been changed, since the Hindu succession laws have been amended recently, you should know the basic areas in which the older schools existed. This Dayabhaga school existed primarily in Bengal. And Mitakshara school had different divisions. In the areas of Maithili, it was interpreted in some different ways. And it was interpreted in different ways in the areas of Banaras, in the areas of Maharashtra. So they have been interpreted in different ways in different regions of India. All these details are directly from the current affairs. You would have read the current affairs correctly. Let me tell you, only the second statement that is given here stands correct, and all the other statements are wrong. They are self-explanatory. In the Mitakshara system, the son can claim the right to property during his lifetime of the father, during the lifetime of his father. Whereas in the Dayabhaga system, it is only after the death of the father that the sons can claim the right to property. Now, this statement is true. However, the first statement and the third statements are not true. These are self-explanatory statements because both the schools have different tenets. If you know the different tenets, you'll be able to clarify the tenets very easily. You will be able to distinctify the tenets very easily. So these two questions are directly from the current affairs. So even history has links with the current affairs. The correct option to this is of course 2 only. Okay. Okay, one question was left to be discussed because, yes, this was the question, I think. No, sorry. Where did it lost? Yes, this was the question. I'll get back to you with the details of this question. Apart from this, all the questions are well discussed. And again, I'm repeating it, as I have been noticing, history has become a tough, area. And no matter how you employ your new ways, no matter how you innovate your new ways of study, UPSC always comes up with something new. UPSC always comes up with new tricks to evade your preparations. UPSC always comes up with some new thought process in which which surpasses your capabilities of arriving to the answer. So you have to prepare your you have to keep your preparation at a level at which, I'm not saying you can hit them all correctly at once at all the questions asked by UPSC, but at least keep your preparation to a level at which you can hit most of the questions correctly. And for that, you need to give a lot of looking at the recent trend, you need to give, I think most amount of time has to be given to the history, in fact, in the GS part, because it's an ocean. History syllabus, be it GS or optional, it's an ocean of studies. And being a factual part of the syllabus, because you see geography, if you see geography, it's more of a scientific study, but history is both an art and science. History has both subjective deliberations, it has also objective deliberations. The problem is, without objectivity in history, subjective discussions would be meaningless. So you have to remember the objective things in a way that that do not escape your mind. So you will have to keep up coming with the new methods, new ways to strategize and study history. Make notes, make extensive notes, make short extensive notes. I mean, I'm saying both the words short and extensive together because I mean something. I mean, your notes have to be short, but they have to be extensive in the sense that they have to cover the major themes. All the major themes have to be covered. It's not that if you are making short notes but leaving the, certain chapters, leaving certain chapters or leaving certain themes of the history. It has to be short, it has to be precise, but yet extensive. That's it. Other details will be discussed later on when we come up with the classes or batches. So I think this is enough. If any questions or any doubt arise, you may contact us and we'll clarify it. Thank you so much.